Thank you. Thank you all very much. General Dunbar, board, thank you very much for letting me be here. It's just inconceivable to me that this is my fourth address and probably my last address to NGAUS as at least wearing a uniform. I cannot imagine how fast the time has gone and the fact that it is just absolutely flown by. To all the distinguished guests, to the former chiefs, I saw General Temple was here somewhere. I think General Grass as well. Thanks, boss. Good to see you again. General Reese and the many former, the two directors here that we've got, General Rice and General Hokanson is with us. The many previous general officers, directors that have been here. The adjutants, generals, most of all, the men and women of the National Guard. I see, 3:30, 4 o'clock on the afternoon of the day, light after the hospitality rooms. I'm going to try to keep this brisk and fast and get through it. You still have the 40th Chief Staff of the Army to follow me, and just saw him in the back of the hallway. We live right next door to each other. We have to travel to Colorado, basically, to see each other. That's how it works out. We get to see each other once in a while, barbecuing at the back porch, and then we engage in conversation so much our wives have to come and pull the burned chicken or burned fish off of the black as a piece of coal, but the conversation is always good, and he's a great man to be the next Chief of Staff of the Army. So I'm really happy to be here. So I think that the delegations I want to acknowledge as well. I had the pleasure to talk to the Slovenian delegation this morning, to the Jordanian delegation this morning. I haven't seen the Indonesian delegation, but the State Partnership Program, fundamental to what we do. It is a piece of our toolkit that is unique and distinct, and these relationships are incredibly important to the department. They're important to our nation, I truly believe, that make us a better military, a better Army officer, Air officer, a better National Guard, and clearly we value them as much as our partners do, and I find it incredible. I'm going to talk about three things essentially today, some of which some of the previous speakers, I have to thank General Lowe and General Porter, the great hosts of this thing, the great state of Colorado and Wyoming, for bringing us together. But many of the things, in terms of an update, I feel like I need to give you, from my perspective, the things that are going on, how we're doing. Then I'm going to talk just a little bit about some of the National Defense Strategy, how we fit into that. And finally, I'm going to wrap around with kind of, at the end, a little bit about how I see some of the challenges that we have in the near term, supporting the things we do, warfight, homeland partnerships, and people, and then maybe take a few questions. So if I could, I'd like to start with a quick video that shows some good things that the National Guard's doing all around the world. Please play the video. The National Defense Strategy outlines the priorities for our military to deter war and protect the security of our nation. My focus remains our three primary missions: the warfight, defending and securing the homeland, and building enduring partnerships. Each one of these missions directly support the National Defense Strategy.
Contact loud and clear.
Okay, line clear as well.
Good flow.
In the warfight, on any given day, approximately 30,000 men and women of the National Guard are mobilized in support of every combatant command around the globe. Our soldiers and airmen work with allies and partners to compete against adversaries below the threshold of armed conflict, to expand our nation's competitive space, and to ensure we maintain our advantage. We are poised in regions where our men and women are postured to delay, deter, and deny adversarial aggression. Guard is ready to respond to emergencies such as hurricanes, wildfires, flooding, as well as assist law enforcement during times of civil unrest.
We're gonna call on 129. It's due west of us.
We are always ready and always there. All right. I know that'll keep you awake for at least another 20 minutes. So I just, I wanted to start with this because I want all of us to know how I see us and how I talk about it. And General Dunbar talked in his most eloquent speech about, and I agree, we are indeed an American treasure. But, this is my elevator speech. This is what I say about you. I'm going to talk to you about the rest of the speech and current ops in the context of this medallion, the mission triad as we call it. We came up with this during General Grass's tenure, and I have ridden it like a $2 mule all the way through my entire tenure, and I intend to continue to do it. I think it's accurately portrays the three things we do, regardless of what kind of the warfare we fight. The many new and emerging missions that we talk about in terms of the homeland, the partnership issues, and I think General Lowe mentioned that there were 76 partnerships. We're 78, and we're going to add 3 more now. This will be new information to you, but soon you'll be getting letters to the States on Timor-Leste, Papua New Guinea, and Egypt, all of whom will be looking for state partners in the coming year. So I just find this an important part of what we talk about, that number 54, as General Dunbar mentioned in his remarks earlier, the importance of the uniqueness of these states, the 54 states, territories, and the District of Columbia that are there below. So let me get into the warfight piece. Please, next slide, so I think that we have talked about this as I talk to you today. Now there's 26,000 men and women deployed in Title X in every combatant command and around the world. And over the last 18 years since 9/11, our mobilizations are over 900,000. We're approaching 1 million mobilizations of our men and women around the world. And the formations, as we talk today, there are major formations deployed from at least 12 states and from brigade combat teams, from division headquarters, from fighter squadrons, brigades, battalions of all types and flavors. It is this operational force that we have become. I think that the importance of who we are and what we do is the identification that to be relevant in today's world, we have to be a lethal force. We have to be a lethal part of the United States Army and the United States Air Force. And I think we have continued to prove over and over again that we continue to do that. We have to admit to ourselves that this transition has not been without some pain. I tell you, as we go around, the question continues to come up: Are we doing too much? Are we walking away from the fundamentals of our business model? We have to understand that our business model does have some limitations. We do need to have a period of time that is predictable when we're going to deploy. We need to have predictable amounts of time in dwell where we can return to our civilian lives and stay true to our employers and to our families. Otherwise, our business model doesn't work. But I would tell you that it's my opinion, and is that a little bit of pain in our system has made us better. If we weren't feeling some stress across the system, we wouldn't have found ways to train more efficiently. We wouldn't have found ways to allocate resources such that we can make such formations ready in such a short amount of time. And I think that we have to be careful. We have to watch it. As with anything, a little bit of pain makes you stronger, but we have to be true to what ourselves are, and we have to stay true to our 1 to 5 dwell periods. We have to stay true to our employers so that they'll continue to support it. So the operational force that we have become, in my view, is something that is just indispensable to the Department of Defense in the National Defense Strategy going forward, and something that we can't walk away from and walk back from. Next slide, please. So this takes us into our next mission on the medallion, the Homeland mission. And what you see here is cyber shield exercise. as far as what's happening in the homeland. We're doing all the standard things that you saw in the video, where we are fighting fires, we're dealing with floods and hurricanes, and we're doing civil unrest, we're doing things on the southwest border, we're doing counter-drug, we're doing all the many things that our unique force structure does for our nation. But we're beginning to do new things, new mission sets. I just point to the events that had happened in Louisiana and Texas over the previous couple weeks, and here in Colorado a couple of months ago. More and more our nation is attacked in the cyber domain. Ransomware attacks where the governors have been able to call on their cyber-trained forces and bring them out to mitigate, to find attribution, to restore when able, and bring in. You see the picture in the bottom left, and Louisiana is one of these front-up states, I think, someplace. Where's Louisiana up here? There we go. As I'm on the phone with General Curtis, and I'm trying to make sure that I know the facts of what he's doing, and the fact that some of those school districts would not have opened had Louisiana Guardsmen not been there to rebuild the architecture of the networks for the school systems that were up there. And I briefed that to the Secretary of Defense just last Monday in my weekly meeting that we have with him. So new and emerging mission sets such as this will become more the norm. We'll add them to our portfolio as we continue to do our unique missions in the homeland. Next slide. As everybody watches this is why I am heading home tonight. Obviously, tomorrow morning there's a meeting at FEMA with the president and some staff, and we're going to talk about this Dorian hurricane. And as its path seems to be easing a little more to the east, the folks in Florida may be breathing a little easier. The folks in Georgia and South Carolina, North Carolina, breathing a little harder. And I just want to tell you that the response, as we prepared for this yesterday, is the response and the collaboration between the U.S. NORTHCOM, FEMA, National Guard, Guard Nation, and the 54, all of the interagency partners in support of Governor of Florida and the Adjutant General of Florida, as we believe that was going to dissect right up the center of Florida to begin with, I think is amazing. And what we saw yesterday, as General Eifert, before it had started to ease to the rest, that the Adjutant General of Florida was amazed. This was his first. He's a new tag, and he was amazed at the response from Guard Nation that came together in a matter of hours with a brigade of EMACs that were postured and ready to go and ready to flow, even pre-landfall on a 4-day holiday weekend here in the United States. Guard Nation was an amazing operation that came together, and I think we should be very proud of that. We continue to talk about all the things I mentioned. You saw the volcanoes, you saw the floods, you saw the civil unrest, you saw the things that we do every single day, and we do this while we are in dwell. A line that I learned from General Ed Tonini when he was testifying in the National Commission of the Army, Future of the Army a few years back. The fact that all of this stuff that we provide in the homeland, we do as members of our communities and as our states. Next slide, please. Okay, so as we talk about change and we talk about the need to adapt, you can make the argument that we are an adaptive organization. And this slide highlights kind of the three periods that we have been as an organization going back to 1636. The first bit from 1636 up until about the turn of the 20th century, the unregulated militia that came, that dropped the plow, grabbed the musket, and ran to the needs of the community and of the country. And I think that was noble. It was unique, as General Dunbar talked about, really as the foundation of our nation's defense for many, many years. Turn of the century, they did the Dick Act. They began to do federal dollars and federal training and began to change us and make us the strategic reserve that we were all the way through 9/11. And then 9/11 obviously has transformed us into this operational reserve. And I just think that that change and that foundation as an operational force has done many things for us. It has made us better soldiers and airmen. It has made us more ready force, a better equipped force. It has made us more responsive. It has made us a force that our services, both Army and Air, are willing to invest in, to grow our leaders, to grow our people, such that we can be more valuable to them as the combat reserve of the United States Army and the United States Air Force. Okay, next slide. So let's start to talk about the National Defense Strategy and how we're doing that. So I don't want to bore you with a long discussion about the National Defense Strategy, but we've entered an era of competition, of global competition with peer competitors, and mostly China and Russia. And so we're going to stop building the force, sizing the force for the counterinsurgency fight that we've been bogged down into the Middle East. And what I want to make the point here is that we are perfectly suited to fit the global operations model of the National Defense Strategy. And so what you see up here is, as the Secretary wants to build a ready, more lethal force, modernize the force, he wants to have allies and partners, some of which are whom here today in this room, and then he wants to reform the department to do it. We fit neatly into every single one of those operational lines of effort. And I think that as you look at the slide behind me, the top phase, the contact phase, it's what you do every day around the world. It's your exercises. It's your state partnership relations. It is the activity below combat where we engage in competition and we expand the space where we compete. It's where they look across in the Philippines and the China Sea that Guam National Guard or Hawaii National Guard are there doing state partnership activities, building readiness, building interoperability, building friends, trust, relationships. That's what the contact phase is. You do your overseas deployments for training. Everything that you do that is touching other parts of the planet, the world, our neighbors, our allies, is part of the contact phase. It makes us a valued partner and presents options other than a China or a Russia for which we want our friends to choose us. The next phase up there is the blunt phase. Now that is a warfighting force that is deployed either in garrison, in theater in the Indo-Pacific, or in Europe, or in the Middle East. It's either in garrison, deployed and live there, or it is deployed there for extended periods of time, like we have now forces in Poland, National Guard forces, or forces that are there that are indeed a warfighting force. They're a deterrent force. They're not a war-winning force, but they're designed to cause our enemies to give pause and understand that you're about to fight the United States of America and their allies. And we are a capable, ready, lethal force that is engaged around the world. And your formations, our fighter squadrons, our wings, as we deploy around the world, we are part of that force, a warfighting American flag that is stuck in the ground. The third force, I think many of you realize, and that is our traditional role as muster. It's an extremely ready force that can be moved around the planet to be a war-winning force. Obviously, that is traditionally the role that you have seen yourselves in, where we can, should we be able to pick and choose the time at which we want to fight the war, and we can be part of that phase as well. And then, of course, last but not least, and most important, is the defense of the homeland, which you do every day. And you do that as a Homeland defense, in a Homeland defense scenario, in a Homeland security scenario, and in a domestic operations scenario, which we clearly play every single day. So within the context of the National Defense Strategy, as the discussion goes forward, the National Guard, an American treasure, fits well into the National Defense Strategy. Next slide. It fits into our triad as well. And so this is kind of the slide at the end where I began to tell you that, as those three things happen, some challenges up there that I'd like you to think about, and that we need to continue as a force to address is, for us, is our recruiting and retention. And, I think that we're looking at the end of it this year to make sure that we're able to fill our formations. It's a readiness issue. Are we able to actually find the men and women we need with the appropriate qualifications to fill out our formations? it is getting to be a bigger and bigger challenge as we do it. We think we're going to make it this year. We're going to be right on the ragged edge of reaching our 335.5 end strength in the Army Guard. The Air Guard's going to make their end strength as they usually do. But this needs to be something that we continue to pay attention to, something that we work on in every single state across the territory. And as demographics shift and as our ability to recruit and retain and train the force moves, we need to be dynamic and move with it such that we can keep our formations full. The next one is and I don't want to get crossways with the next speaker because they don't like this word, concurrent and balanced. But this is my ask of us, is that as an operational force, is that the old model, in my view, of modernizing the force as we go, and timelines being what they are, and acquisition programs costing what they cost, we're never going to have a homogeneous fleet of anything really across the formations. But the old model of taking only the active component and cascading all the old equipment into the reserve component, I would argue doesn't work anymore. It's a model where if you cannot be deployable, if you cannot be sustainable, if you cannot be interoperable, then you are not relevant and you can't function as part of the combat forces. And I believe, I've heard General Conville talk about his view of the reserve component and intend to look at the modernization across the enterprise, which includes the reserve component as well. So I mean, while he may not use my words, I think he shares my view, at least, that part of the utility of having the force that is deployable, sustainable, and interoperable is key. And without concurrent and some sort of enterprise approach to modernizing force, that you can't do that. The next bullet up there, improve our readiness models. Well, modernization, I want to mention just in terms of as we take our old stuff and we make it more combat relevant, nobody is better at us than doing that, I think, in terms of using our NGAUS money to modernize the force, and to using our relationship with our industry partners and our contract friends to make sure that we have the ability to take every opportunity, and many of them are here on display downstairs, that allow us to take some of our legacy equipment and make it more combat relevant for the warfight, and I think that's a best practice that we want to continue. To improve our readiness models is something that we must always continue to work on. I think that as we talk about our business model and being true to our business model, we must always look to lean it out. And I think that one of the tenets of the National Defense Strategy for us is, as they look to take a big piece of the Army, which is more than 50% in the reserve component, we have to make it ready as fast as we can. So every opportunity that we can take to do home station mobilization, to find better ways to train and make sure that we are better and faster at getting ourselves mobilized and out the door, we need to do that. And then in those readiness models, understand what our strengths are. I think one of our lessons learned is that we are pretty good at mobilizing, getting ready, deploying, and then demobilizing. That's what we're built for. What's a challenge for our business model is getting ready, building readiness, and holding it without mobilizing and going places. That challenges our business model, and we have to think through that in terms of the utilization of our force. Moving into future missions, and I think we as a community, I think last year, if you remember, last year I had an old phone booth, AT&T phone booth with some of the things that most of our kids don't even know what that is anymore. What is a phone booth? And we didn't want to be that. We want to be leaning forward into new and more relevant missions, and we have to be accepting of that. And as we build a force that works towards modernization, recapitalization to defeat a peer competitor such as a China, such as a Russia, we have to be willing to aggressively embrace divesting ourselves of old platforms, including ones that are older, like C-130H models or whatever the issues may be. We have to look to address that and move into new mission sets as we go forward. And those are hard for us, but I honestly believe that there is so much mission available out there. There's no shortage of mission sets to move into, but we have to have a realization that as we go forward, we're going to have to divest ourselves of some of the older equipment and move into some of the newer equipment as we go forward. I think that future missions, and I make no bones about it, I've been very vocal in the fact that, I was at the Rose Garden the other day when they stood up the Space Command, U.S. Space Command, and at some point I'm quite confident they're going to break away and they're going to create a Space Force, a separate and distinct Space Force. And we need to be part of that. We as a reserve component, we have all of the deployable space capability in the reserve component right now resident in the Air National Guard. We have space capability across the Army components, and as we move into that all-domain conflict world, there's going to be very little that doesn't touch space domain, regardless of where you are. And I believe strongly that we cannot diverge from our services, ever. Our Army Guard needs to stay closely aligned with the parent service in the Army. The Air Force needs to stay aligned with our parent service in the Air Force. And should there be a Space Force and equipment move out of their services into a new service, we need to go with them as a reserve component of that service. And there needs to be the creation of a United States Space National Guard. So I think that's coming. And last on that list is leader development, and all of us and all of you and all the people that we have out there is, I go back to that medallion. When you look at that medallion up there, warfight, homeland, partnerships, we cannot do any of those without that individual in the middle. That is our most important weapon system. We in the National Guard like to portray that person as a strength. We know that our unique civilian skill sets make us a strong contribution to the Department of Defense. We bring other skill sets from our civilian lives that sometimes they don't have resident in the active component forces. We need to leverage that. We need to make sure that as the force grows, we need to continue to make sure that men and women don't have to choose between a career as a guardsman and a career as a civilian. I see that potentially as a big part of my job, as having to make sure that as we design the force, as we design the national defense strategy, as we design the dynamic force employment models, we design those things with the thoughts of the restrictions and limitations, frankly, or unique attributes of the National Guard and the reserve components up front. There's 820,000 members in the reserve component that need to be thought of on the front end of these plans, and I think that's incredibly important. And while I agree with General Dunbar that that's an appropriate symbol that represents the National Guard, I think we ask a lot of that person in the middle. We ask them, to be there to train, whether it's a lot more certainly than 39 days a year. And we need to make sure that they're properly compensated. The duty status reform legislation that's ongoing, that to make sure that you get equal compensation kind of for equal work. And I think that the more we can do that and the better we can take care of our soldiers, our airmen, our reservists in general, the better we're going to have out there. Next slide. So I think I'll end here by just my observation, as this is my last address as the chief here to NGAUS. So I'm coming to the end of a 39-year career in the military, and I would argue that we are better than we have ever been. I would argue that that soldier, that airman in the middle of that mission triad is better educated, it's better trained, it's better equipped. She has a better opportunity to succeed. We have a more diverse workforce. We have no expectation that we only ask two things of you to serve in our United States military. And that is, you be willing to swear an oath to the Constitution of the United States of America, and in our case, our states, and you be physically able to do your job. And that is the only limitations that we have. And so I would argue that we have an opportunity now, because we need every one of them, to have the best, the most trained, the most motivated, the most disciplined, the most ready force that we have ever seen. And, you know, it's like kind of like the old song. So people talk about, hey, remember when, and things were great, we didn't have to worry about this or that. And I tell you, these are the good old days. We are a better force, and we are more ready, and we are more diverse, and we are more tolerant than our predecessors. And that makes us a better National Guard and a better part of the Department of Defense. And as I look forward, and clearly the most important part of the force is the men and women that you all lead. The men and women that myself and General Hokanson and General Rice strive to get resources for, so that the adjutant generals can train them and make them ready, so that when they have what they need to do their jobs. I think that you know, that's the most important part. I saw it in their eyes this morning when I talked to the company grade officers. These are men and women who want to be in the military. They want to be in the National Guard. They endeavor to be part of the greatest Army the world has ever seen, the greatest Air Force the world has ever seen. And I think that I was on the southwest border last week, and you know, I was seeing a part of the Texas operation in Tornillo, Texas, where they were, the Texas governor had actually involuntarily mobilized some Texas guardsmen in Title 32 to go do this duty on the border. And I wanted to go see, you know, if there was any heartburn about that. I wanted to see is, hey, am I taking you away from your school or your job or your spouse? And as I went and I talked to him, and I expected to get some blowback. I got nothing. I got nothing but motivated soldiers who wanted to be there. And I asked one soldier, I said, one specialist, did you volunteer for this job? And he looked at me and he said, well, sir, I'm involuntarily mobilized, but I volunteered for this job the first day I put this uniform on. And I thought, my God, you know, we're going to be okay. We are going to be okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think I just want to say, you know, being the chief is, I got a year to go. I'm not stopping yet. I'm running through the tape here. I am incredibly honored to be here. The strength and the status of your National Guard, from my view, in my elevator speech, as I talk about the medallion, warfight, homeland, partnerships, and people, I have a very good story to tell. Just like General Dunbar's speech, sometimes our elevator speech can get a little long. So at the risk of stopping, I'll stop right here. But thank you very much for letting me come see you here at this great organization of NGAUS, to General Robinson, the former chairman, or the former president, Gus Hargett, and to all those on the board today. Thank you all very much for having me be part of this event. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So I know you want to take questions. If you want to take one, we could do that.
I'm happy to take, sit down. I'll be happy to take one question if somebody has it.
Okay.
Anybody got a question for me?
Ladies and gentlemen, if you have a question, please use a microphone set up where we conducted the state's roll call, or the same position on the opposite side of the theater.
Sir, I have one.
Right here, sir.
Okay. I'm
Good
sorry,
afternoon,
I'm trying to hear you here.
and welcome. Lieutenant Colonel Brad Sams, 166 Cyberspace Operations Squadron, First State, Delaware, this great republic. I was wondering if you could take a moment and share from your experience and wisdom the NDAA and the sections 1036, 37, and 38, and there's a concern that there might be a potential impact to the concept of federalism in this Constitution.
To the concept of federalism in the Constitution. So I'll tell you, I will tell you, I do know what those are. 1036 is an indication that gives NGB the authority, I believe, to do, is that the inspection one? Is that the?
That's correct, sir.
that
The
gives
inspection and then the
if-
takeaway of the president's capability to take away federal funding to units, and I guess directly I'm concerned about the impact on state autonomy as in the federalist construct.
Well, I'm not sure that that the indications of to states' economies would be, part of the thing. I mean, for what
Autonomy,
it
I'm
is,
sorry,
the
sir.
ability to have somebody come do an inspection on a National Guard that was seen as not in compliance with federal law or policy, I think is something that Congress has the opportunity to expect me to do. If they want to give it to me and want me to have that authority, they have to give it to me in law because clearly I don't have it. That would be the first point. With respect to, I don't have the authority on the taking away federal dollars or federal recognition that was given to the president that could be delegated to the Secretary of Defense. We'd have to see what that is. But if somebody, to take resources away from somebody that wasn't in compliance with federal law is, I don't know, that seems reasonable to me. I mean, I'm not sure what that is. And the last one was, I believe, 1038, which wanted the National Guard Bureau to select USPFOs and make sure that they were properly trained and staffed for the proper oversight of federal funds expended in the states. That's, I think, what the law says. And I think that those are authorities I don't have. I mean, because of the state-federal responsibilities, it's clearly not part of my portfolio. And if Congress wants me to have that oversight authority and responsibility, then they have to give me those authorities. If they don't want me to have it, then they wouldn't give them to me. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have another one? Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Captain Strawn with the 250th Intelligence Squadron. And my troops are in the contact phase that you described pretty much every day, supporting the GCCs. And one of the biggest challenges that I face is making recommendations to my commander for where we can accept risk when we're looking at building our lethality. So if we take time away from the day-to-day mission to do training for the future fight, we're accepting risk on the contact phase, and vice versa. And we're often faced, the discussion I often hear from my NCOs is I have 18 to 24 hours of training requirements to do in a 16-hour drill weekend or more. So I was just interested in your thoughts on that, accepting risk in that with those time constraints, sir.
So that's essentially what commanders do, right? They balance risk. And as with respect to the national defense strategy and those portfolios, you have the compete and the deter piece. If you compete, if you have allies and partners, if you have friends, then hopefully all of the things that you do build a structure that avoids having to go to conflict. So if you go to conflict, obviously there's a trade-off for resources. Does making friends, building allies, partners, trust, goodwill, that costs money, that costs dollars. You could stop doing those things and invest all of the money into the conflict phase, buy new equipment, upgrade what you have. So I think that's a question that the Secretary will look. Ultimately, the President, the National Defense Strategy says we're going to do these things. We're going to compete. So I think, but as it goes to you and to your unit, I think, you wouldn't be worried about that. You would be worried about doing things like making sure that your unit's ready, that it's trained, your equipment works, that everything there, and you can do what's in your military skill set to be a lethal part of whatever your MOS or AFSC is, and add value to the Army and the Air Force in that regard. So it's a good question, strategic question. I think but that's what every unit does, balances commanders, balance risk. And I think that, and wherever that risk is, you elevate it and determine if your boss wants to assume it or not. I can do this or I can do that. Where do you want the risk to go? And I don't think you want it too scripted. I think you want to be able to have the opportunity within your formations, within your plans at the unit level to make sure that you have the opportunity as a commander to do what you need to do when you need to do it. If you're getting ready to deploy, maybe you take less risk in all of the other things and you focus on your warfight skills, and vice versa. You just get back, maybe you can spend some time doing other things. That's what commanders do.
Thank you, sir.
Okay?
Thanks. Thank you, sir.
Sorry, I hate to interrupt and give you the hook, but
All right.
we got another JCS member who could have come out. It's great.
Absolutely.
But, sir, thank you for all the years of coming here, all the years of service. I know you're not done yet, but this is the last in August, and we as an association greatly appreciate you taking the time and coming here and talking to us and mentoring us and giving us your vision. We have a small token we'd like to give you. It is uniquely Colorado and Wyoming. It's a belt buckle.
Wow. Is that under $25?
It is $20, sir. That's
Okay.
exactly what we paid.
Thank you very
Congratulations,
much.
sir. Thank you very much. Great job.
Thank you very much.
Take a
Thank you
picture
all.
right there. It's a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you.